Back on Inside Tennessee, a little discussion going on between Don and Susan. We wish we could show you all the commercial breaks. All right, Mr. Secretary.
Fabulous.
Yes, Tennessee is ranked #1 in the nation in election integrity and has been for the last 2 years. Explain that designation and what it means.
Well, what we want to make sure is that every Tennessean knows that their vote is counted once, no more, no less. And the real strength of our electoral system, while we've got great laws in place, whether it's photo ID, watermarking, paper ballots, strongly restricting the possibility of outside funding election administration. You know, our machines are not connected to the internet. I repeat, our machines are not connected to the internet. The real strength is bipartisan election commissions. Republicans and Democrats working together. They keep an eye on one another. They program the machines together. They count the ballots together. They certify the elections together. They're working together at all the polls throughout the communities. To me, that's the real strength. There's a very few decisions at the local election commission level boil down to a partisan decision. They really are just working to make sure that every vote is counted once, no more, no less. And like Susan and like Don both, you want to make sure that every registered Tennessean has the opportunity to vote and know that they can cast their vote in a fashion that meets the utmost of integrity.
One change that happened fairly recently in Knox County, we used to have the machines that dialed in and you cast your ballot, and then you trusted that the machine had that and that information was then taken to the election commission and your vote was counted. That changed, Mr. Secretary, and now there's a paper printout of that. Explain the reasoning behind that, because a lot of people thought the old system worked, but this was to underline what you were talking about.
That's a great question. So the legislature and the governor, at our request, put money in the last budget during 2022 to appropriate money to have go to what's called a verified paper audit trail in all 95 counties. So it's either a hand-marked ballot or a machine-marked ballot, or there's a technology out there where you do press your buttons on there and it shows a tally tape underneath a piece of glass where you can see how your vote is counted. So what's really important is, the old machines were fine, honestly, but it's kind of like if you have an iPhone 5 and then you go, if something goes wrong with it, you go to the Apple store, they look at you and say, hey, we're not servicing that. So, those vendors were no longer even wanting to sell those machines, not servicing those machines. So it really was important that Tennessee keep up with the latest technology and also do something to make sure that Tennesseans could trust in the integrity of the voting equipment.
Do you find, are there less problems, in fact, with the current system than there was with the wheel system?
I'm sorry, Don, I had trouble hearing you.
I'm sorry. Do you have less problems with the current voting system than we did with the former wheel system, as John described?
We certainly hope so. Anytime you have some type of new technology, it takes time for people to adjust, but that's why poll workers are going to be there to make sure that people know how to cast their vote according to their wishes. And like I said, I know people who didn't like the old wheel system, but they got used to it. And so it may take an election or two to get used to this one. Yet one more reason that we're fortunate the first time these machines are being used in the area is during this presidential preference primary, when the turnout, while it's unfortunate it's lower, it will give a few people a little more time perhaps to get used to that technology.
Mr. Secretary, I voted last Saturday. It's a long ballot, mainly because...
Well, that's your fault.
That is, it is. It's because our party, my party, has delegates that we put on the ballot. And there were at least 3 presidential candidates that had delegates, some of whom were like 60 or 70 each. So if you haven't voted yet, be prepared to sit for a while and go over all these names. Is there any simpler methodology that the Republican Party should be doing? Should we have conventions, or do you actually like having the primaries like this?
Well, it really, honestly, it's not up to me, and I don't really have a preference for it. I mean, I ran for delegate one time, wound up being an alternate. I think actually you and I were at that same convention together. Back when I was in the legislature. I really leave it up to parties. I do think that some people are going to go in and look at that ballot and think, wow, I have no idea who some of those names are. So, it certainly benefits you probably to be at the top of the alphabet. That's not good for somebody whose last name starts with W.
Like mine.
But anyway, I'm not going to really opine on what party's method they should use to pick their delegates.
One thing we should point out, Mr. Secretary, that a lot of people just don't know is you do not register for party in the state of Tennessee. Explain that, and if you think we'll ever see a change in that based on the makeup of the legislature.
Well, John, that's another great question. In Tennessee, we are what's called a quasi-open primary. So when you go in to vote, you select whether or not you want to vote in a Republican or Democrat primary. And there is a challenge provision so that if someone believes that you should not be voting in that primary, there are poll watchers who are there sometimes, appointed by candidates, appointed by parties, who might say, hey, I see that person's got a Republican sign in their yard, yet they're trying to vote in a Democrat primary. I want to challenge the bona fides of that person. So that does happen very rarely. In Tennessee, it's a quasi-open process. But I do think there's a lot more conversation. There were some counties out there's a lot of conversation during 2022 about potential crossover voting. I do know that Representative Brian Ritchie down in Blount County has a bill this time which would, place a little more restriction on who can vote in those primaries and not just be able to walk in and be able to pick whatever primary you want to and change back and forth.
It should be important to say, though, that even if you're challenged, you'll get to cast a vote. It may be provisional, but you'll still get to cast your vote. So I would encourage voters not to be afraid that some poll worker is going to say, you don't get to vote. I don't think you're a Democrat. I don't think you're a Republican.
That's a great point, Don. I mean, you still have the opportunity to cast that provisional ballot, but I want to point out those challenges are few and far between, and certainly wouldn't want someone who, frankly may decide that they're no longer a Democrat and want to vote Republican, or no longer Republican and want Democrat and want to be a Democrat. I think people do change their minds and decide they want to affiliate with a new party. So
we're holding out hope for Susan.
We're going to take another quick break on Inside Tennessee. Mr. Secretary, some closing thoughts from you, and also a bill that is in the legislature right now we want to get your thoughts on as well. That's rather timely. We're back with more Inside Tennessee right after this.